Hey, good morning. This is Dawn Thompson with my beautiful co-host Nicole Harlow, and we're so happy that you're here. And we'd love to introduce you today to Ashley Holmes. And today we're talking about natural fertility. And Ashley, we're thrilled to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm excited to be here, and I feel like my path chose me, and it's really my role to help other women that are struggling with infertility because I too once struggled and know that I couldn't access the support that I was looking for back in the day, but I'm grateful for the ancient wisdom and healing modalities that I have learned that help me to conceive naturally and what I can then offer to others.
Cool. Well, tell us, start with your story. Like, what did you go through that drove you to this?
I was trying to conceive in my late 20s and was in denial that this was an issue. And I, at that point in time, thought the only answer was to go to the fertility clinic. And so I did. And also knowing that this was going to end in heartache or happiness. And I'm very grateful that it ended in happiness. And I was blessed with twins eventually, but it was also not a route I was willing to go down again and something that I would put myself through again because it took a mental and emotional toll on me. And I walked away with unexplained infertility and no answers from the doctor and didn't think that I could conceive any more children on my own. And that simply wasn't the truth. So I think that sometimes we think that there's only one way and only one option and only one answer for us instead of being open to see all the other ways that we can help ourselves in this very challenging process.
So, so, let's just get into it. Let's talk about, I suffered from fertility issues myself, but I never anticipated it because I'd had two previous children with no issues in my early 20s. And then my husband and I decided to have more kids when we were in our mid 30s. And it took me 3 years to get pregnant. And I had multiple miscarriages during that time. And it wasn't until I went to acupuncture. And then by then we just thought we were giving up on getting pregnant because, clearly it's not working. Like there's something that's not good for us or whatever. It's not our path. We were happy. We had 4 kids. Like it's fine. And then I went to an acupuncturist in an exchange because I'd never been to acupuncture. And I had a new client who was an acupuncturist. And she was like, do you want to swap services? You can be my doula and I'll do treatment on you. And I was like, sure. And she did our first treatment and she was just like, hey, just so you know, you better be on doing some sort of birth control because you will likely be very fertile after we do this treatment. And I just went for treatment on my periods because after my last miscarriage, my periods were just wackadoodle. Like really long. They were lasting 10 days. Like it was terrible. And she's like, I'm going to fix your periods, but it's also going to fix this. And I had my first cycle. It was unreal. I was blown away. I was one of those people who was just like, I don't understand how sticking needles could do anything, right? Like that just seemed weird to me. So, yeah. And I had my first cycle after that treatment. It lasted 3 or 4 days, just like it's supposed to. First time in my life that I'd had a period like that. And then I was pregnant and I now have a 15-year-old. And then the next one came, they're only 13 months apart. I got pregnant so easily. And I was like, I don't know what she did. I don't know what happened. I'm guessing, like, I have no idea. To me, it was just magic. I don't know. But I assume that that's part of what your repertoire is. And I'd love to know more about what else.
I love that you brought this up because I offer yin yoga and I understand why acupuncture is similar because it's working with your meridian lines in the same way to open up the energy channels. And so if you have blockages and energy isn't flowing, then it is going to be difficult to conceive. And so it sometimes doesn't make sense to our analytical mind, how this is helping, how this is working, but it absolutely does. And yin yoga works in the same way where you are applying acupressure to these meridian lines in order to allow the energy to flow. And so it's working with your nervous system to come into rest and digest mode and come out of fight or flight mode as well. And you sort of get to be your own teacher and do these practices and these poses for yourself and begin to understand and listen to your body and tune into your body, which is really so empowering when often we've been taught or conditioned to outsource our power and outsource all of the answers instead of looking inward. And it really is that opportunity to journey inward and understand yourself and your body better.
Yeah. I mean, still, even when you say that, when you're like, I'm working with the meridian lines, I'm like, that's still woo woo and so weird, but it works for me. So, I want to address the people who are just like out there right now, just going, I thought like, just, that's so woo woo. And I don't know. And, all those things, because I was that person. So I know that there's probably a lot of people listening who are feeling that way. And let me tell you, I came from a very Western minded medical, believe in the system. And then I became a doula, still with that mindset. And pretty quickly you recognize that, oh no, there's a lot more. There's a lot more going on that we should be aware of. Fear, like any sort of negative thought processes and all those things impact everything that we do. I like that you know, you're addressing those issues, but what do you say to somebody who's just like, that's weird?
It's fine to think that it's weird. That's not the issue. But if you're not open to receive, then it's not going to work as well for you. So it doesn't matter necessarily that you don't understand the how and the why and the when and all of those questions. It just matters if you are open to receive sort of any healing modality, because it will work to the effect that you're open for it to work. But where there's resistance or where you sort of close off, then it's not going to work as well. So
Yeah.
that goes for Reiki and chakra balancing and all sorts of things that if you're open to receive. And as soon as I started doing this, I kept going back to it because energetically, I always felt better, even though initially I didn't understand the reasoning
Right.
behind it. But then the more you dive deeper into it, it becomes very clear. And it's like, why wouldn't I do this for myself? Why wouldn't I give this to myself? And why wouldn't I offer this to anybody? Because it is holistic, it is healing, and it has zero side effects and only positive benefits. So that was sort of my big reasoning behind not wanting to go back to a fertility clinic, was that I didn't like the way that I felt when I was on fertility drugs, and I didn't like emotional pieces of it and just like the emotional roller coaster ride that I wanted to get off of. But yeah, I thought this was the only way. This is what I have to do. There's nothing else available for me.
Ashley, I have a question. And before I get to it, I just want to say that I have a very similar journey. I had trouble getting pregnant with my firstborn, which was almost 8 years ago at this point, which is crazy to even think about. But we tried for 14 months to get pregnant with him. And like Dawn kind of said, like my periods were very long. They were super irregular. It was a really bad guessing game that we played for a year or so. And then we did decide to go to a fertility clinic. But at the same time, a couple months prior to that, I had received my Reiki 1 practitioner certification. And the month that I actually did conceive, I received my Reiki 2. And throughout that whole pregnancy, Reiki was a huge, huge component. And I had pursued those modalities because I was like, I could go to someone and get a treatment, but if I'm doing this consistent, treatment, fertility treatment, and, trying to get pregnant each month, instead of going to someone else and outsourcing that, like, let me look within, and really connected with my own womb space and my own body, my own energy. Ultimately, I mean, that is what shifted my entire motherhood journey, because I will tell you, I now have 4 kids and never had any other issues conceiving. And, always my births were very energetically focused, very support focused. My son, who is almost 8, he calls it magic hands now. Like when he's not feeling well, or if he, gets hurt or whatever, mommy, can you do magic hands? Like he grew up with knowing that that's how almost like, mommy kiss my boo boo. It is, where he understands, or doesn't understand, but knows that, mommy's hands can help him feel better. And my other ones are a little still too young to comprehend that in that way, but they do similar things, and they obviously follow suit of their older brother. But I even would Reiki the medications that I was on for those, couple cycles that I did take the fertility drugs and things like that. And even that, I would just simply like Reiki them and say, allow this to do exactly what it's supposed to do without any crazy side effects, and just kind of give it a little prayer before I took it. And I didn't have, those really crazy side effects that you hear about with Clomid and other fertility drugs. So I was super grateful for that as well. Anyway, long story, but my question is, did you feel like the modalities that you learned for yourself with fertility supported you through pregnancy and through postpartum as well? Because I want our listeners to know that it's not just necessarily conceiving that these can help, but can support your entire journey. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Absolutely. And I'm covered in goosebumps, which is just my way of knowing that this has helped me and continues to help me every single day of my life. And it is not just a one and done type of thing. These are all tools that I have and access and use throughout all of my life. And it has completely changed my lifestyle and the way I treat my body and the way that I look at my body, and to know how capable my body truly is. And my twins are now 12 and my youngest is 6. And so the difference between those pregnancies is night and day, where the first time around was a high-risk pregnancy, an emergency C-section, a harder postpartum recovery, and caring for 2 little ones as a new mom, versus when I had done all of this training, then I conceived naturally. I went hiking when my water broke. I had a VBAC and was back at baby in the yoga 10 days later. Completely night and day difference, and completely empowered in that process. Yet I was deemed geriatric by my doctor at that time. So I didn't embody that. He could say that, but I felt a million times better the second time around. And it was so much easier. Granted, it was only 1 versus 2 the first time around, but it really showed me what I was truly capable of, what I wasn't tapping into or accessing the first time around, that could truly help me and continues to help me every day.
Tell me about what are the things that you specifically do for if you've got somebody who comes in? Is it like an individual assessment that you look at their specific situation and then you go, okay, these are the modalities we should use? Do you do multiple modalities?
I do multiple modalities. And so everything I do is tailored and customized to the person that I'm working with, because some people have never had a positive pregnancy test, whereas some people have come to me and had multiple rounds of failed IVF and they don't want to go back to a clinic. And yet, my most recent client, after working with me, went back to the clinic and is now pregnant with twins. So it really just shows the power of taking that time to pause and reset and really nourish yourself from the inside out before, if you choose to go back to a clinic, so that you can really set yourself up successfully, because it is draining and depleting to be doing all of these things. And you really need to take that time to create that fertile foundation again. And so we look at nutrition is a piece and part of it, but it's not all of it. It's yoga practices that support you and our meridians and our organs house certain emotions. So sometimes we can be angry. So we might be working with the liver that week to process the anger that we're feeling, maybe because we got our period again, and it's the last thing we want to see or have at this moment. And so just working through in real time what they're experiencing. And I've had, sessions where, yes, we've been on a call and perhaps anger was evident on the call. And yet when I've done a Reiki session with that person, I could tell that they were holding back tears. And so at the same time, there is sadness that needs to be acknowledged and processed and moved through, so that they can actually heal and clear that, so they're not taking it into the next cycle and they're not taking that along with them on the rest of their journey. Because energetically, we can be holding on to so much of what has not worked yet, and it's really stopping us and blocking us from creating that reality that we do want to conceive.
I wonder if there's if you've got somebody right now who's listening, who's been struggling with fertility, what's the first thing that you would, and maybe they don't even want or have the ability to go to a fertility clinic. Maybe they don't even have the resources to do that, and they'd rather this be their first step. What are some of the things that people could take away from this episode right now?
We really need to acknowledge the amount of stress and pressure that we're under when we're trying to conceive, because most often When people come to me, the issue lies with them and not their partner. So really that's another burden that's placed upon their shoulders. So really working with the nervous system, working with the stress and letting the little things go and clearing sort of that mental fog that we can be under of the constant to-dos and the lists and the checking things off, and almost doing it unconsciously because we're just doing all the things because we have to do all the things and that's the only way, and really being more mindful and present in our day-to-day life is really going to help to shift things for you moving forward, because rest is not in our society taken as something that we generally and typically need. And yet as women, we are not designed and meant to move through the month at the same pace and the same rhythm for the same 28 days. And so it really means honoring your body and honoring your needs and where you're at in the moment. And yes, sometimes you have more to give and you are full of energy and you can take on and do a lot of things, but you're not meant to be hustling, grinding and doing HIIT workouts and just high intensity for the whole month. And so it's really bringing that balance into your life, really balancing that yin and that yang energy within you so that you have a more harmonious state of being in order for conception to happen.
And what about, you mentioned nutrition. Let's talk about that a little bit. Like, what are some things that people could do right now from a nutrition standpoint that would be significantly helpful?
I use the Sister Science 2 yoga, which is Ayurveda, which is the healing of the mind and the body together and the science of that. So understanding, I would do a test to find your inborn constitution, whether you're predominantly Vata, Pitta, or Kapha, to find that out. And then to find, and this is what I work with my clients with, is to help them choose the foods that are most nourishing for them, because there's so much misinformation out there, for them to actually choose the foods that are most nourishing for them, that will absorb the most nutrients, so that those are getting down to the reproductive tissues, because those are the last tissues that are being nourished in the body. So it's important to understand how everything sort of flows, and that if this isn't happening, it's not flowing all the way down. And so that's something that can be worked on. But warm, nourishing, grounding foods are so helpful, because a lot of raw, cold foods are harder to digest. They take more digestive fire, digestive agony, it's called, to be absorbed. And so the body has to work harder for you to get what you need out of that. And so really getting back to basics, really, your stews and your warm, delicious meals that are nourishing on all sorts of levels. And the best friend for you in your kitchen is ghee. So that's GHEE. If you have not heard of it, that is the best thing to be cooking your meats with, your sauteing your vegetables with. That is really going to just help you.
Okay, wait a second. Stop right there. So there's two things that you said. So you said to find out your type. How do they do that? How do they find out what their type is? And then my second question is, why is ghee so good? Like, because I have ghee and I never use it.
It's just like the Ayurvedic superfood that is just helping, your joints, your tissues, everything, and just nourishing you from the inside out, really, and helping you to just get the most out of what you're eating versus, say, using cooking oil or butter, or it really is clarified butter, but it's just the process that it's used with that makes the difference.
Okay. I have no idea. So there you go. Now, how do we find out what our type is that you just mentioned? You mentioned 3 types.
I go through something with my clients, but you can easily access that online and find a quiz and do a quiz and find out what your predominant dosha is. And so that will tell you whether you're primarily composed. Vata is air and space. So these are the types of people that should not be consuming a lot of raw, cold food, because they already have that within them. So that's creating more imbalance within their body when they consume those. And Pitta is fire and water. That's what I primarily am. So I do not eat a lot of spicy foods, teach hot yoga, all of these things that are very heating put me into greater imbalance within my body. So it's understanding and knowing that. And then Kapha is water and earth. So they are typically your more grounded people who may need more of a kickstart to get going or to get that digestive fire going. When you know that and understand that about yourself, it's easier to pick those foods that are more nourishing and serve you best, because it's really looking at what serves you best and not the fads and diets and trends that you see so predominantly out there in the world. Because those, I promise you, are not setting you up for success. And this will serve you for your whole entire lifespan, not just your fertility journey.
So we would make sure, if you have a specific link to a test, would you send that to us? So I can put in the show notes for people to just click on right now in the show notes, go there and you can take a test.
Okay.
Yeah, and I wanted to point out that, a couple episodes ago, we talked to Eric with Mama Meals, and he talks about postpartum, but the same foods that are nourishing in postpartum to replenish and nourish your body are the same foods that Ashley just mentioned about supporting your conception and fertility. So it's kind of full circle, right? It's those same really warm, easy to digest, nourishing stews and soups and comfort foods to ground yourself, like she said. And also, I just want to point out, because Ashley, this is so in my wheelhouse. I love all of this stuff. But, if you guys are listening and you're like what Dawn said earlier, like, wow, there's so much information and it's overwhelming and I don't know where to even start. The great thing is that you don't have to do this alone, right? Don't go to Google and start Googling all the things that we said. Reach out to one of us, Ashley, myself, we'll point you in the direction of where to start, a good consultation or assessment. Just like you wouldn't just go randomly start Googling which drugs to take for fertility and start taking them without, someone guiding you, right? You want that guidance, you want that support. And these modalities are really complementary to the Western medicine. Or if you're you're at the point where you're just over the Western medicine, then they can stand alone as well. But it really is, like she mentioned, it's individualized, just like everything else we've talked about with birth and conception and pregnancy. But in addition to that, it's the level, we meet you where you are. A lot of these modalities will meet you where you are, and they come from ancient practices before Western medicine even came to be. Acupuncture, acupressure, yoga, Ayurveda, energy healing. That's all real new age, you want to call it the mainstream. It's all new, but realistically it's not. It's us remembering where we started without all the technology, without all the, Westernization of everything. So I just wanted to point that out.
Ashley, what's your success rate when you start treating patients for this sort of stuff? Infertility
success rate is, I will say 100%, because everybody I work with is better than when I started working with them. So to me, that is success. To me, that is leaving everybody feeling happier, healthier, and possibly with one or more babies, which is just truly a blessing. And so it really is just choosing you and taking that time and attention to focus on you and to understand your body and what serves it best, and to really honor that and to choose that, because I think we have been conditioned in the West to really look outside of us for a pill or prescription or for an answer. And it really is getting back to, wait a minute, I know my body best. When I first got my period, I know what my periods are typically like. I know when my fertile window is. I mean, lots of these things aren't rocket science. We just have to be conscious and aware and really start to pay attention.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a perfect example of that. Going 3 years without being able to get pregnant or getting pregnant and then losing the pregnancy. And then I have one treatment. I wound up having 2 or 3 treatments. The one treatment was the one who, I was blown away to go for years with very long 7 to 10 day cycles and then have one stinking appointment with an acupuncturist. And she did something else crazy. She ran this device around the edges of my finger, and the one finger made a noise on the thing. And she goes, "Are you having trouble with your ear?" And I was like, "Yeah. I have this crackling sound all the time." And she goes, "Oh, I'm going to fix that too." And she did. And I could not, this type A personality could not have been more blown away, because I was so just like, I mean, I even said to her when she said to me, like, okay, well, if you aren't wanting to get pregnant right now, you should probably use some sort of birth control. And I was like, birth control. I was like, yeah, whatever. Okay. And so you were saying about being open. I was open to the possibility. Like, I mean, I was just like, I was kind of in this whatever stage. I'm like, I've given up, right? Like, whatever. So I wasn't like, oh, this is never going to work. I was just like, I don't know, but I don't know, whatever. And ultimately it worked. And I think I would even say it changed my life. And not just because I went and had babies, but because it really opened my mind to the possibilities of something different that I just didn't, because I didn't understand it. I didn't necessarily believe in it. And so,
I always remember the movie The Santa Claus when it comes to this stuff. Like, sometimes seeing isn't believing, believing is seeing. And sometimes I think with these modalities, it is that. It's like, yes, you like, because Dawn and me are very similar. I think I just found this other journey and this realization a little earlier than she did. But my like core is type A, very organized, very structured, and I need like the proof in the pudding kind of thing. So, but I was like 18 when I dove into this work and meditation and energy work and stuff. So I was still kind of that like curious teenager, I guess you can say, spirit, where I was like, okay, I'll give it a chance. I'm skeptical, but I'll give it a chance. And then I just immediately started seeing the results. And I was like, okay, let me dive deeper into this. Let me dive deeper into this. And now, like at 35 with children of my own, I'm so grateful that like they don't have to have that like skepticism growing up, right? Like they fully understand. Like my son understands, I mean, so much about birth and pregnancy and that component, but also like the healing nature, like nature and how it heals and how it grounds us, and like the benefits of, being outside barefoot, and like just these little things that like kids are so much more receptive to. So I think that's a really good point too, is these modalities can support your children once they're here as well, because they're open to these concepts. You're not trying to convince them of anything. They just understand.
Well, listen, again, I mean, I would even say like the use of essential oils. There's a lot of people who are just like, oh my gosh, and as was I, but I'd seen so many of my friends that I really trusted say, no, listen, this is amazing. And we started using them. And now, listen, I don't sell them. I know it's multi-level marketing, but I don't sell them. That's not what I want to do. I'm not interested in selling it to people. But what I am is I use them. And my children, my two youngest, are now 14 and 15 years old. They both each have been ever in their entire lives on antibiotics one time. That's it. One time each at a different time. And it was because the infection that they got grew to, they both had a pretty severe strep throat, and we needed the antibiotics. Everything else I have been able to completely do with essential oils. My son, 15, he literally, or 14, usually his illnesses are like 24 hours long. That's it. I give him the oils and he'll ask for them. He's like, Mom, I need oils. I got a fever. Like, he knows. And now I give it to him, and within 24 hours, he is back in action, and it never lasts more than that. It's mind boggling. And I still don't get it. But I believe it. Because it's worked over and over and over again now I think we started probably nearly 10 years ago that we started using oils. I swear by them. I mean, like, it's crazy. So, I know we're kind of getting off the topic of fertility, but I think that just having this introduction of their other things, and they're better for you. They have less side effects. In fact, most of them have no side effects except for making things better, and just introducing this idea to people that there are a lot of different options out there.
For myself, the experience of having my twins, the state of mind I was in at that point in time in my life of high stress and high pressure, and that carried through the whole pregnancy. And then having twins that cried often as well. I think the whole stress carried throughout the whole pregnancy into their early childhood. And then to see that when I was pregnant naturally, I was in the middle of my prana meditation training. I had like a little Buddha baby in my belly as I was going through all these things. And so just the spirit of the child that comes through when you're in a different state and place carries through and helps them, be in a better state and place and have a better birthing experience and a postpartum experience for you as well on the other side. And so I think it's so invaluable to just know that what you do not only affects you, it affects your baby, and it's going to, it just creates a very positive ripple effect for your whole entire future and for your family.
Sure. I mean, I talk about this all the time with doula clients is the cortisol levels matter. Your cortisol levels matter. They matter on what that baby's going to be like when they come out. Because if your entire pregnancy is full of stress, you're just flooding that baby system with cortisol, right? And that's a high stress hormone. And I say now, I tell clients, if you get into an argument with your spouse or whatever, or you're really like tense, I want you to just focus on your belly, talk to your baby, and tell them it's okay. This is not about you. I love you so much. Because just by that act, you now are, instead of those cortisol hormones, you are now flooding your baby with oxytocin, which is the love hormone. And it can disrupt that cortisol level action. And it's critically important. And you also mentioned how your twins came out really not cried a lot. So as a doula, I've helped, I don't even know, probably 50 sets of multiples. So I've got a lot of content, and consistently twins that were taken early, like, because, we're twins, so you have to deliver by 37 weeks, whatever that bullshit is. So, excuse me, I'm sure. Did I say that out loud? I said that out loud. They would be ultimately premature because obviously we don't actually know for sure that they were 37 weeks or not, and blah, blah, all those things. But how many multiples were constantly crying when they came out early? And I saw this with singletons too, if they were taken too early. And in some cases, they actually needed to be, there was some issues, but in most cases that was not true. And so you just touched on it and it made me want to say something about it because I've seen it consistently. There has never been a time where babies came at 36 or 37 weeks, multiples, because the doctor said, well, they're just twins, so that's what we have to do. That those first few weeks postpartum were really, really rough.
I will validate that because I was a C-section baby that was probably taken too early and have learned over the course of my life different issues that has caused. Okay. But I will also tell you, my father and my mom, but mostly my father, I was a very whiny, crying baby that was colicky and wouldn't settle unless I was being held and rocked and all the things, right, that you hear. And I was born in 1989, so it was like the top of I feel like, when C-sections were just starting to come out and, be a thing. And I was also a September baby. So my mom says the doctor literally was like, okay, when do you want to schedule? I was breech, so that was the reason. And it was literally like, oh, the day after Labor Day, because it was hot summer, here in New Jersey. And she's like, I just want this baby out of me. But my due date was a good couple weeks out, like mid-September, late September. So it 100% did a lot of things. I'd say with my gut health, with my mood, obviously, with some of my control issues later on in life. But yeah, it's definitely validating hearing that.
Yeah, for sure. Anyways, you touched on that, so it made me want to mention it because it's something that the average person isn't going to hear just through normal channels. It's like this is the sort of deep knowledge that you gain in the maternal health space and, fertility space and all these things. It's like, it's not the mainstream. And I know that we're outliers and there's probably people listening right now. They're just like, oh my gosh, these ladies are wackadoodles. I promise I'm not. It's just, proof is in
Honestly,
the
though, to
pudding.
that point, Dawn,
The proof is in the pudding. You
Yeah.
can't see it
Yeah.
over and over and over again. It's just like I have this conversation with about, people are like, people question me online all the time. Like, oh, are you a medical professional? Like, how dare you have this conversation about whether or not low fluid is being overdiagnosed or not? Low amniotic fluid is being overdiagnosed or not. You only have to go to so many births where the provider said that the baby is needing to be born for low amniotic fluid, and then the water breaks in the middle of labor, and there's plenty of it. You only need to see that so many times to understand there's a problem, right? I don't need a medical degree to see with my own eyes what's
I
happening.
think also, like, it's good to be an outlier. I think we talked about this on one of our last episodes. It's good to be an outlier in our system currently, because if you're not an outlier, you're blindly following the over medicalization of birth, and the outcomes are not good. Their outcomes are C-section and maternal mortality and infant mortality and PMADs and all these great freaking things that we're dealing with in our country right now. So, like, why not give the outlier a chance and like have a beautiful experience and have a connected pregnancy with your body and understand your intuition and all of the things.
Ashley, how have you seen your work impact? Like, we've kind of took a left here, and I'm sorry, we do this a lot, but how do you see it impact the birth process? Because, right, because, a lot of the people that are going to be listening are likely already pregnant. But so how does your work impact that? And can somebody be already pregnant and come and get some of this work?
Absolutely, because you have to birth this baby into being. So a lot of what I do is pranayama and breath work. So when you can learn how to moderate and utilize your breath, because that is your anchor, especially when you're delivering, especially when it's challenging, and to have and access that, even though, you don't think you can, or you can't take a deep breath, it is there and it is available to you. And when you know how to work with and utilize your breath, I don't have to physically be in the room with that person because everything I do is virtual, but they will remember because they've done it so many times how they can utilize and access their breath in these challenging moments. And that's a lot of what we're practicing on our yoga mats, is sitting with discomfort on our mat in order to be able to face those obstacles off of our mats, because we as a society do not sit with discomfort. We push it down, we repress it, we run away, we do all the things except allow what needs to flow through us for 90 seconds so it's not stuck energetically in our bodies, and then be able to move on. And so I think it is so empowering to have this and to be resourced with it, to know that your breath can always be your anchor between your mind and your body at any given moment, and to use it consciously.
Well, I think that I turned to, again, after I was a doula for many years and now decided to have a couple more kids, I turned to hypnobirthing or hypnobabies specifically, because I just like their system much better. But hypnobabies was instrumental in teaching me how to relax, because again, as type A personality who seems to be in fight or flight on a regular basis, I spend my life with my shoulders up here even now. And I still, to this day, use the relaxation techniques that I used for birth, because I realized how much it helps me just in general. So I do a lot of breathing, and when I know I feel myself like a cat with my claws out, I go, okay, I need to get back into my body, because I am not doing, like, this is not helping me at all. I'm going to be a ball full of cramps and, angst and all of that. So I know exactly what you're talking about, because that I had to teach myself how to relax, y'all.
You don't often know that. And I can attest firsthand of buying these fertility books when I was trying to get pregnant the first time around, and having things like FT tapping and body scans and all these things in this workbook, and it is empty because I wasn't in the mind space to be able to do those things for myself. I would have needed someone to guide me through those things and to say, this is how to do it. This is how it's going to help you, right? And so at this day and age, we have so many resources available at our fingertips that really, I give my clients the modalities more of what they love and what works for them and what is most relaxing and feels the best in their body, because that is the goal, to feel the best that you can in your body. Because when you feel that way, how much easier is it for you to be able to conceive?
For sure. This has been great, Ashley. I think that I hope we've opened people's eyes to this idea that there's then what Western medicine has to offer. And, there's really no risk in trying, right?
There isn't.
There's no risk in trying. So, I know that these things aren't always kind to the pocketbook, but I think many of these things are worthy of investment, in my opinion, in my own.
Definitely. And it's way easier, I promise you, than going through IVF, if you can dish out and spend that money on IVF, then set yourself up on all levels in a holistic way, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, for this to be as successful as possible for you. Because without doing that for yourself, I feel like it's a disservice. And I feel like it's a disservice on the clinics, and to not, have people prepared in the utmost best fashion, because that's what serves them best. There's no point just pushing people through because they're quote unquote ready.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Nicole, do you want to do your question? Or are we feeling like, how are we doing on time?
Yeah. So, Ashley, besides someone who, obviously supports women in these natural modalities for conception, and obviously, as we talked about, throughout pregnancy and postpartum, who would you say is the most crucial person in a woman's village?
The most crucial person in your village, I believe, is your partner. Because without them, they're there to hold your hand and to do all of the things. I mean, my husband was thrown into the deep end right from the get-go, like with twins. And I could see him mentally processing in the elevator when we left the clinic, when we knew it was twins. And it was just like, two of this. You could just see like it's sinking in. And I think that also they can't be your everything.